the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 354. How much does a woman's comfort cost in the Army? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And if he decides to chime in, we have our own Honey Badger Radio's Doge, Brian Martinez. But
he was the Doge before the Doge was cool.
Yes, he was the Doge before the Doge was cool. Somewhere,
OG Doji.
From ICMI, I believe 2016. It might have been 2018 when we were in London. I have a picture of the Doge with the Doge. It's not from the best angle, but it's there. But in any case, we are returning this week to our slog through feminist federal funding with a visit to the Department of Defense for some more information about sexual assault in the military. And, this is one we were talking about the title today before the show, because I didn't just want to repeat the same title as last week, but we are still talking about the same subject because there's a lot to go through, even though I only chose 2 companies to look at. And there's, as you can see on this page, there's a buttload of companies that provide various things to the military related to this. But some of the really stupid stuff is at the cheaper end, where they're paying for videos and services and stuff like that. And so I picked 2 of those this time, because I believe we've looked at some of this other stuff previously, and there's quite a bit of it. And these are just the contracts. There's also grants that have been made available. But as you can see, this list just goes on and on and on. The military paying independent contractors for various services, personnel, products that are used to assist with, and so on, their whole system addressing sexual misconduct in the military. So this is kind of like the military's human resources department. But before we get into all of that, before we have that discussion, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And with that, let me really quick make sure that I've got the right thing up here. Even with not having to handle everything, I still managed to not have something open that I needed to have open. and it's because our Discord is too big. It's not like the spoon being too big. It's just too big. So there we go. So I was in the wrong channel on the right computer, or the right channel on the wrong computer, or something. There we go. So this extensive list, you'll notice as we get, let me get back down to the bottom here. This goes on forever, I swear. There we go. This is not the end of the list, by the way. You can see if I scroll up here, it's got pages and pages, and I'm at 100 rows per page, and it has 8 pages of companies that are getting paid. The last thing on this page is 28,000, right? So we're looking at different amounts here, going up to, at the top of the page, 28 million, almost 29 million. And as we get down here closer to the bottom of the page, you can sort of see the actual award descriptions here vary from professional services to the defense human resources activities, sexual assault, let's see if what it goes on to, prevention and response office, SAPRO, down to there's sexual assault prevention training, integrated resilience training and support for the prevention of cyber harassment and technology facilitated sexual harassment and sexual assault. So if you if you get raped online, apparently the Army has somebody to help you with that if you happen to be a soldier who gets raped online or something like that. But yeah. So I decided I wanted to look at, I looked at the name of this company and I thought, given what catharsis is, this release of, extreme release of pent up emotions, pent up stress, and so on, what the heck kind of thing are they producing? And if you look at how much they've gotten paid over time, their total awarded amount here is 22,000 or 220,000 plus some change. And so they must be really, really great, right? Like they must be doing something absolutely marvelous. So I looked on their page, and this is what we have. I think we kind of went over this a little bit. We looked here a little bit the last time. And as you can see, I want to make sure, Mike and Lauren, are you watching my live stream in the Discord?
Military
Yes.
sexual violence prevention is a mission readiness issue.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
Is it something about cyber rape again?
It might be. It appears to be general sexual misconduct prevention, but their whole thing includes. You remember we went over a couple weeks ago, maybe it was last week. We finished it up. There was an article lamenting that the sexual assault prevention program had been just destroyed, ransacked by the Trump administration's ban on DEI. And well, DEI doesn't have anything to do with sexual violence prevention, right? Sexual violence is criminal activity. And so if they're trying to prevent criminal activity, you really don't need to focus on anything to do with race, gender, sexual orientation. It's just boundaries, consent, and refusal, and not being aggressive, things that are pretty normal to discuss regardless of the person's characteristics. But apparently that's not the case with this military training. So I went through this, and yeah, the services that they provide are kind of interesting here, right? Over the last decade, few topics have received more attention in the U.S. military than sexual violence. That alone, think of what that sentence means.
It shouldn't be an issue. If everyone is trained to the point of being a human killing machine, you shouldn't have to worry about them raping each other. They should be They should be able to defend each other from rape. And they shouldn't be all that interested in raping each other. And that would be the case if they were sexually segregated, like they're supposed to be in the military. At least
They used to be.
One would assume so.
But yeah, it just, the thing that gets me about this is, so over the last decade, the United States has been involved in multiple military conflicts on multiple fronts in multiple countries at different times, right? We've faced enemies that we designated terrorists. We bombed places. We bombed the shit out of some places to remind everybody of the way that it was described. We've had the military at times sent to our border. We've had people shipped overseas to fight. We've had people trained overseas in preparation for fighting. We've had people on other countries' borders because of tensions between countries. But few topics have received more attention in the United States military than sexual violence. Like, not preventing death in battle, not the weapon systems, not training, not who the enemy is and how to understand them and how to kill them, but sexual violence. Like, I'm not quite sure I understand why.
It's
that
won't
would be
somebody
the
think
case.
of the women's. It's always won't somebody please think of the women's, and that's just how it manifests itself in this particular description. Like, never mind defending the country with all the might that can be mustered. Just please don't rape any of the women's. Right? What women's?
Meanwhile, if you are new to our audience, you should look up a documentary called The Dancing Boys of Afghanistan, just for comparison.
Yeah.
Our military was there too. So, and our military had specific orders on how to handle that situation, or rather, how to not handle that situation. So it goes on. Whether it's a film documentary, Department of Defense annual report, or simply another news article, preventing sexual harassment and assault is on everyone's agenda. And so what they're doing, what their site says here, is we produce innovative, accessible, and research-supported programming that shifts behavior and delivers results. It sounds very professional, doesn't it? Since 2000, we have developed and delivered live web-based prevention education programming for military audiences, conducting over 11,200 trainings for Department of Defense personnel. Having this image be blue and the text be white is just killing me my eyes. Sorry, guys. Reaching an estimated 2.2 million service members. And they go on to describe their values and their mission and everything. And it's, like I said, it sounds very professional. They list off the organizations that trust them, and it's all the military organizations. We also have the U.S. Department of Agriculture, in case your cattle are sexually harassing each other, I guess.
Like, the military has existed for a bloody long time, right? Like, none of us are in favor of war, but it has to be said, war has been a fixture of human interaction for a bloody long time. We're talking tens of thousands of years, and sexual harassment among military personnel has never been an issue for that entire time, right back to the ancient Greeks, who were known for being quite rapey. Even the men and boys used to rape each other, but it wasn't a problem in the army. It wasn't a problem in the military. They kind of loved each other.
The military was all men.
Well, yes, very much so, until very recently.
Yeah.
And like I say, even in the case of the Greeks, they loved each other in what might be called romantic ways, even though that was named after the Romans. I guess even the Romans loved each other in romantic ways. But it was in those days, it was was less rendered in romantic ways and more rendered in storgic ways, or in philic ways. They even if the male soldiers were fucking each other, it actually made them stronger, because they were all in it together. Even the male soldiers in the Greek armies who were fucking each other, it only spurred them on to be even
More unified.
more unified in their defense of each other as equals. But it's not the same if you throw men and women together, because they can be in love with each other in ways that are not necessarily equal. This has always been known, because men fall apart in these disgusting simping ways when women are put there, in ways they don't when they just love each other as men, in whatever ways they happen to love each other as men. It's dare I say it's equal love when it's just men, whether it's eros or philia or agape or storge. They love each other as equals when they are all men. But when you throw women into the situation, everyone becomes wild animals. And
you have very unequal ways in which power is exercised in a relationship, because of course when the relationship is gynocentric, then you have more incentive for the man to be self-sacrificing, and more incentive for the woman to be selfish, right? And it's just a fact. There isn't something sexist about saying that, but a lot of women will get upset hearing it, right? But the fact is, the types of living arrangements that are being referred to as traditional today, which if people could afford to do that, they did historically, but a lot of people historically were unable to afford to do that, and women did work. It's just they worked because they had to, not because they wanted to, in most cases, right? But that idea of the traditional man working and woman homemaker relationship, that is male sacrifice and female benefit right there. So in any case, I noticed it's the Forestry Service is in here too. This is obviously in case you find yourself alone in the woods with a man instead of a bear. Very, very scary experience.
only you can prevent forest wars.
I will never get over that stupid meme. Sorry, but yeah, we won't go there. But if you absolutely need to go there, we have a video somewhere on the Honey Badger radio channel, or the HBR live streams, or Honey Badger live streams channel. We have to talk about the bear, and you'll understand what I think of that meme if you watch that video. So they go on, and again, you can see here their statements about their content are very professional sounding. We offer a variety of programming options able to be conducted virtually or in person, intentionally scaffolded to meet each service member where they are in their career and help arm them with the tools needed to improve their command climate and overall culture. We also have general government trainings regarding harassment and discrimination that can be customized to military populations. So you would expect these to be pretty decent production value videos, right? I mean, they're getting paid, anywhere between $2,000 or $3,000 and $25,000 to create these programs and these videos. They do have people they send out to do in person, like where they have it's like a TED talk, except instead of TED, it's just on some platform somewhere on a military base. in an auditorium, and everybody's required to be there, and nobody can just get up and leave if they don't like what's being said. And they're going to talk about consent. But they have these videos that they created to add to this, right? And then we'll switch to this. So they have these different materials, promotional materials, to get people to come to classes if, say, they're going to be on a campus or they're doing something that's voluntary. You have to be a customer of theirs to download them. But you can kind of see they're pretty basic looking. They look like something that you might see in a high school up on the wall, or a college, university up on the wall. But I did find a couple of their videos. So let's take a look here. This is one that they might play during a talk on consent. And the first thing that I noticed about it, we started looking at this last week, but we didn't get very far.
Am I going to throw up? Is this going to make me throw up?
It might make me reload. It's doing something weird. I've had this possibly on the screen too long. Let's see what happens.
What are the best ways to ask for consent?
What are the coolest ways to ask for consent? What are the coolest ways to ask for consent?
So I'm going to go back to the beginning here. I'm going to see if I can make this bigger. It probably won't do much good to put it in theater mode, but let's see what happens. Maybe it's a little bigger. But see if you can read it's not YouTube closed captions. The video has its own captions here. So see what you think of these captions. And see what you notice about these captions.
What are the best ways to ask for consent?
Non-verbally. Non-verbally.
Are the coolest ways to ask for consent?
Non-verbally.
Yeah. Well, but the first thing that they did, this is why it's costing a bunch of money to go through their sexual assault prevention training and remove all the DEI shit. Right? Because it's not a separate thing that's put off to the side that people are taking by itself. It's woven into everything. Down at the bottom of the page here, you see she, her, hers. Let's see if we have he, him, his. Now, I got a question. Did any of you look at this picture and not know what her pronouns probably were?
No.
She doesn't look like a he, him, his, or an it. Right? And then we have that, the he, him, his.
I mean, he looks like he could be a Xi Jinping, to be honest.
And then we have this one is also, I believe, she, her. Go back and look what it says, but
Ask for consent.
You know what?
I think she might have been the first one. No, I skipped her. That's why when I hit forward 5 seconds, they, them, theirs. So she is using they, them, theirs. The title of this vid is Ways to Ask for Consent. So obviously, that's what it is. And they have 3 people in this video. Chances are every penny that went into making this video went to paying the speakers in the video, because they're you watch this.
Ways to ask for consent.
How do you ask for consent with someone who thinks they are a they them? Are you okay with me touching you? Yes. Are the rest of you
y'all
okay with me touching you? All of you? How many of you do I need to ask?
What if
Are
one
your
of they them
headmates
says
okay?
no?
What happens if one says no and another one says yes?
You have to wait till they switch, I think, is the term.
The consensus that I have heard in the past is that if someone has headmates and one of them says no, they all say no, even if some of them say yes. That's what I've been told. But if you don't know that, then you're fucked.
A genuine,
or you're not fucked.
A genuine dissociated identity disorder sufferer won't actually remember.
Well, there is that.
So technically, it shouldn't matter. But if they're just pretending to have dissociated identity disorder, then they're gonna accuse you of rape and they're gonna ruin your life. So, I mean, you should have run a fucking mile ages ago, but before they even said, "Hi, I'm they them."
I have only personally met one person who I believe genuinely had some sort of dissociative disorder, and that individual was aggressive, not a victim, but may have been oh, somebody's really staticky right now. There we go. But that's a situation where when you know somebody is that disturbed and dealing with demons, like that, it's better to not embark on an intimate partnership until treatment provides a solution to the problem, because that's a whole other situation. Just from my personal experience, that's a dangerous situation for both people involved. But yeah, I just look at this video so far. I personally am not seeing $5,000 worth of production value here yet.
You know what I think is like really cool? Like us kissing. Is that something that you're into, or
like that's how she's asking for consent?
Yuck.
Oh, and we have a newbie here, somebody else that wasn't pictured before, so we'll see if he has pronouns too.
I'll be honest,
Yep.
I really want to kiss you.
He, him, his.
Would you be into that?
Do you want to try fill in the blank?
Natus? Like,
So, like I know a whole bunch of names for different positions, but that one I've never heard. Fill in the blank. Is that when you have sex with a bureaucrat? Jeez, Pete.
mutually vibing right now and might get into some freak nasty later.
If it's okay with you,
Ew.
I'd really like to kiss you now.
I've only one question. Would you like a cup of tea?
I'm glad they could
Oh
be
my
silly in the
God.
process, but I'm looking at this, all right, and I'm thinking about this. Bunches of young men and women who've gone through training. Now, you take, say, Marines, for instance. Like, they actually subject those guys to training where they have to go into a cement, if I remember right from the description, it's a cement room that is full of tear gas, where it's not ventilated, and they have to be subjected to it for a short period of time and brave it for a few minutes before coming back out. And it's to desensitize themselves to the tear gas, because then it will make it harder for the enemy to use it against them later, right? And there are some guys that are completely desensitized already, that they have a genetic immunity to tear gas. And then there are some people who are genetically more sensitive than others to, than you're normal to tear gas. And imagine coming away from training like that, or training where you're shooting at a target and learning to hit center mass, learning, to make sure that you're making kill shots, or training to be a sniper, or learning to hit somebody right in the eye, anything like that. Been in the mud for 6 months with no bathing facilities, or 6 weeks, sorry, with no bathing facilities, eating nothing but MREs, and then you have to sit in an auditorium and watch this. I'd be going, can I go back to the tear gas?
Kill me now. Kill me now.
Like I've
Get
worked
it over with.
I've worked for the government at Her Majesty's pleasure, and they even teach us not to bully each other in the Royal Mail, which is patronising enough, as if grown adults don't know not to bully each other. I would imagine in the army, they do sort of teach you not to fuck the local prostitutes if you can handle it. And they almost
Yeah,
certainly,
you should hear what they tell the soldiers that train in Korea.
yeah, and let alone not to fuck each other in the event that you're even interested in fucking each other. And I don't imagine it has much of an effect, because soldiers be like soldiers do. They're probably still going to do it, and so I don't know what effect this is having. I don't even know what area of discourse this is supposed to be even having an effect. Like, if you are going to have sex with a local Vietnamese prostitute, you should at least say, "Please, like, what is this teaching anyone?" I mean, it's not as if you're even doing the propositioning, right? It's not even as if you're going up to Vietnamese prostitutes and saying, "We love you long time" in Vietnamese or whatever. I don't even know what I'm saying.
At this point, like, now there were things that did have to be dealt with in the military. Like, Gen X will remember the and anybody older will remember the tailhook incident, which there's some people that have said that the news media described it as worse than it was, and there's some people that said it was downplayed. Doesn't really matter. Everybody involved, that the people who got in trouble should have known better. But alcohol was involved, and you don't know as much better when you're drunk as you do when you're sober. And anybody that gets into a situation where they lose their knowing better, and then behave in a way that they can be criminally charged for, should just not drink, right? If that's your situation with alcohol, then you just, okay, well, you can't drink because alcohol turns you into a criminal. Similarly, if you can't help yourself from just finding the nearest car and taking off with it and running into a pole or somebody else's car or shit like that, don't drink. Simple, right? But unless you have a serious problem, then you go into rehab. But issues like that are incidents with specific people, and people who are not involved and are not guilty of that don't need to be lectured as if they don't know any better. And for the most part, especially right now, like Gen Y and Gen Z, millennials don't usually get referred to as Gen Y anymore, but they had all this stuff in high school. They had all this stuff in junior high. They were subjected to these kinds of videos for probably half of the time they were in school. Like anywhere, at least 4 years, but more likely 6 years. And none of it's new when they get into the military. It's not stuff they've never heard before, especially Gen Z. So if they're doing this stuff right now, if they're subjecting soldiers in the military to this right now, it's completely redundant. Anybody that gets to 18 years old, signs up to be in any branch of the military and doesn't know this stuff, it's not because they haven't been told. It's because there's something wrong with them. And it drives me nuts to see that this goes on like this. What we were just watching, we saw 30 seconds of it. This video is 1.5 minutes long. And it's all just different ways of asking for consent. Ways to ask for consent. Can I take your shirt off?
It feels so funny to say it outside the context.
Oh my god. Oh
yeah,
my god.
so like, now if she was really, really cute, like cheerleader cute, or maybe some guys would be like, oh, that's so adorable. But if she's like, I was taller than several of the guys I dated when I was younger. If I acted like that around them, it probably would have scared them. But I was never cute like that. I was like always, I have a heavier jaw than most gals do. In fact, feminists use that to accuse me of being trans. My gyno would be shocked. But in any case, yeah, it becomes creepy when you aren't the cute little petite heart-shaped face, perky girl, and you act like that.
This is stuff that was being taught to us civilians like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Way back in the fucking Gamergate days. And we were, reacting to it back then as the ridiculousness that it was. And if we had said to people at the time, imagine if this was being told to people in the police, never mind the armed forces, like the military, and people would have said, no, that's ridiculous. That would never happen. That would be going too far. And such is the evolution of the Overton window. At the time, they say it would never happen, and then it happens. And then they go, well, what's the problem with it happening now? It wasn't like we were saying it would never happen back then, like it was the line that we drew in the sand back then. It was the line that we drew in the sand back then to say, no, that's ridiculous, that would never happen. But now it's happening. So now where's the line they're drawing in the sand? I mean, it can go no further. If it's gone as far as the military, the people who are supposed to be as disciplined as possible for the sake of the most exact, particular pursuit of excellence, where does it go from there? Like, what is even the point in the most particular of jobs, the most particular of disciplines, if even they have been infected with the same feminist bullshit that affected fucking college students 20 years ago? Like, I keep saying, when has it gone too far? You need to ask yourself, if it hasn't gone too far now, when has it gone too far? And if it's already got as far as the military, that's literally as far as it can go. That's the most disciplined discipline that's supposed to exist. There is nowhere it can go from there. So the answer is it can never go too far. We're going to keep pushing the Overton window until it's completely destroyed society. And then
push it right over a cliff.
Yeah, and then we'll still blame men for everything. For fuck's sake.
Yep. And I mean, this kind of training, I've worked in a few corporate environments because of my my preference for having 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And so I've been through this kind of training over and over and over again. And it's different corporate cultures take different attitudes toward this. I've only been to like 1 or 2 trainings like this where they did stuff like this. But for the most part, most of my employers, the training was about a combined set of things, knowing when you're making someone uncomfortable or unhappy because they're sensitive about the topic, or you're bringing up something that isn't a workplace discussion, or you've provided too much information, or you've asked for too much information, or you've overstepped, crossed a line, something like that. And then also understanding the difference between when someone has upset you inadvertently and they didn't mean to, versus when someone is being a deliberate asshole. And so there's the previous thing can be resolved through a discussion and mutual respect and so on. But if someone's being a deliberate asshole, then there's disciplinary procedures that take place, right? And you don't want disciplinary procedures, and you don't want to lose coworkers if someone's not being a deliberate asshole, and you can work something out. But the places that had stuff like this, what I noticed in those environments was everybody was presumed to be a deliberate asshole, even if they hadn't been accused of anything. And then if somebody did make an allegation, it was like, oh, well, we knew you've been caught, and that was it. You got progressive discipline from there on out. And anything else that you got in trouble, you were late for work, your paperwork wasn't perfectly in order at the end of your shift, anything like that, that colored it. It got sort of added into it. Well, you think you can get away with this stuff because you're this demographic, and obviously, since you're bullying other staff for being a different demographic, you did this for the same reason, and so you end up with a cascade of, like, I've seen people start out with a clean slate, get an allegation, and then like a month later they're fired for repeated write-ups for minor infractions that weren't happening until after they had that allegation. And so it is different when they have the political correctness or the DEI shit that's in there versus employers that are just like, this is supposed to be a culture of mutual respect. Try not to step on anybody's toes. Try not to presume malice if somebody does step on your toes until you have evidence that it's malicious. That is a situation where Hanlon's razor is useful. If somebody seems to be ignorant of your boundaries, where maybe you're a little sensitive about something that everybody isn't sensitive about, or there's been some flirting, but you're not willing to go on a date, or, anything like that. Let's see. We did get a super chow, I think. Yeah, this one is ours. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 354. So let's think through the fact that so many congressmen, senators, and judges have a family member who often serve in NGOs. And then you start to see that whole feminist grift is often set up from the time a bill is passed to the eventual payout. And yeah, that's another thing. A lot of these companies do have people in the company whose family members work are either part of the elected part of the government or part of the bureaucratic part of the government. And when these laws pass, there's a process, right? You get the law passed. Like Title IX was passed in 1972, which I was born in 1972, so that should give you an idea how that's been around. I'm about to turn 53. So Title IX basically just said that there couldn't be discrimination to keep women out of academic participation on university campuses. And it was specifically passed to get rid of quota systems for certain types of areas of study like medicine and law and stuff like that. But those quota systems were already going away when the law was passed. So it was kind of outdated when it got passed. And so the first thing that happens is a government agency is created to handle that law. And they've got a sub-agency because it's part of the education department. But in order to ensure university compliance, they had to make policy. And the way that policy becomes treated like it's law, they write this policy, they hand it over to Congress, and if Congress does nothing for 45 days, the policy gets treated. It's enforced as if it is law. And so the first thing they did was expand it from academic studies to extracurricular activities like athletic participation. And then it became all about sports because they didn't need to enforce it in regard to academic studies. And because it became all about sports, they, over time, in trying to figure out a way to ensure that girls and women were not being discriminated against by university and high school athletic departments, because they eventually also expanded it to secondary education institutions instead of just the post-secondary education institutions. They created a quota system. So if your university didn't have an equal number of male and female participants in its athletic program overall, you were obviously discriminating against the women. So if you didn't have enough female interest in sports, then the university had to start axing male programs. And in the 90s, this had a nasty effect. It started taking out men's gymnastics programs and men's Olympic wrestling programs because they weren't going to get rid of their football programs, but there weren't necessarily women clamoring to play football. And there weren't women clamoring to be on the wrestling team. And so they decided gymnastics and wrestling could just be tanked if they had to tank something to comply. Because they couldn't get more women to join their teams. And that is essentially how this works, right? And then the next thing that happened is, well, we ended up with a fairly balanced representation between male and female on university campuses because they reduced the amount of male participation. And so there wasn't anything for them to enforce again. In order to remain relevant, they came up with, it was called the Clary Act, and they went into the business of promoting a sexual misconduct awareness on university campuses. And that started in the late 90s. There was also already an effort happening. It wasn't Title IX related, but there were already, like, I had a consent class when I went to university in 1991. So, and it was this dumb too, but it was organized by campus feminists. So it was this dumb, but it was also as informal. It was almost like a dare program activity. It was really dumb. But and it was all stuff that we already knew. Like, there wasn't anything they said that anybody was like, gosh, I never thought of it that way. Like, gee, I had no idea you shouldn't rape drunk people when they're passed out. Who would have thought, right? None of us sat there and were surprised by the idea that a person who is unconscious is not consenting to sex. That didn't surprise a single student. But in any case, they started going down that road. And then, of course, in 2011, you had the Dear Colleague letter. And they had a whole set of rules that were imposed on the campuses. And all of a sudden, companies like this were poised to make a shitload of money going onto university campuses and training the staff and the students and the local law enforcement, how to work with the university, and then setting up offices. New jobs were created on university campuses just for handling sexual misconduct allegations. Like, there was the whole 9 yards, the same thing that we see in the military. So, yeah, this is very lucrative, very lucrative. And these people, everything they do is this quality or less for the money.
Well, I was thinking maybe we could, have a meal, have some dessert, maybe go back to my place, play a little Scrabble with our bodies.
God.
That is the creepiest motherfucking thing I've ever seen.
Gay.
But the dumb thing, the dumb thing is, like, what's the stereotype? Oh, I took you out to dinner. Let's go back to my place and have sex. Like, now they're promoting it.
This a whole thing really just reeks of desperation, right? Like, because if this was really as prevalent as they want us to believe, right, then I could see the legitimacy of having this, right? But it feels so forced because you're right. I don't know anyone who, besides the odd psychopath, right, who doesn't know that you shouldn't take advantage of other people. I mean, that's pretty much common sense. You learn that in flipping kindergarten, and obviously not the sexual thing, but you learn how to behave around other people. You learn how to treat people fairly. I don't know a person who thinks that, oh, it's cool to take advantage of someone else.
No, not anybody that isn't fucked in the head.
Yeah. So that's what you want me to believe, that this is just the type of personality that's running rampant in our military?
It's just totally normal for people to have to be told this stuff, you guys,
Yeah.
You're the only person that already knew this stuff. The whole rest of the base was completely ignorant, despite having this training in middle school and then junior high and then high school, and like they got to
Right.
have it again.
Right. Right.
Uh,
And then, for the most part, if an assault like that does happen, there's a high likelihood that alcohol or drugs were involved. You know what I mean? Things that just lowers your inhibitions, right? And increases your inability to make sense of reality, you know?
yeah.
So, yeah, okay. Be careful what you do when you're partying. There's a chance that some things could happen, right? But nobody needs to be sat down like a fucking 5-year-old and taught how not to touch other people's naughty bits without their permission.
Well, and they also talk about this stuff like it's more or less complicated than it really is. For instance,
Yeah.
I had a friend in college who, before she took women's studies, which she did, unfortunately, but before she took women's studies, now I'll remind you, I am from Ohio, and we have a pretty heavy teen drinking culture here, and it's been that way for decades. And when I was in high school, like I didn't go to parties because I knew that there was going to be alcohol, and my father was a school teacher, and from the time I was in elementary school, my mother was involved with our city government, and if I got busted at a party where there was alcohol, that would have been really bad for them. And I really wasn't interested in drinking. And it's like I hung out with my friends other times doing other things and left the partying to people who were a lot more interested in hanging out with a lot of people all at the same time and drinking and stuff. But it was a very common thing. Like most of the students would be there. Most of the high school kids would be there. And that's all over the area. You see that in all over Ohio. You see that in Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Kentucky. There's a huge drinking culture. Now, you get to some parts of southern Ohio and Kentucky, and then there's also like one community I know of in northwest Ohio that it goes in the other direction really hard, and there's a teetotaling culture. And in fact, the university I went to is in that community in northwest Ohio, and when my parents met at that university, it was a dry campus, and it still was a dry campus when I went to that university. But the community was a dry community when they went to that university, and it changed, I think, during their senior year, and a bar opened in the downtown, and it was called a stag bar. I don't know if those still exist or not. Jen Bottle probably knows what I'm talking about because he's pretty close to my parents' age, right? If your son was born a year before I was, then you're probably pretty close to my parents' age. But a stag bar is just for men. You know, they can't tell women not to go in there, but they don't make it comfortable for women. For example, the bathroom did not have a door because there were only supposed to be men in there, and it did not smell good. The bathroom did not smell good. From the description that my father gave me, you went down a little hallway, and then the bathroom was off to the side, and it was open. And once you got into that hallway, you could smell the bathroom. Couldn't smell it in the bar though, because all the chemicals they used on the floor. But yeah, it was just a bunch of guys in there hanging out, drinking. There was food, like mostly sandwiches and stuff, and that was it. There weren't a lot of I don't think there was really any place in that community for women to drink, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because I have been around my more than my fair share of drunk women, and women are idiots when they're drunk. Just to be fair, men sometimes are idiots when they're drunk. I don't know any woman that I've ever been around when she was drunk that wasn't an idiot when she was drunk. Not when she was like really really drunk. So yeah, And before anybody goes, what about Karen? I've seen Karen drink a lot and not get drunk at all. So that doesn't count. I mean, when I talk about drunk, I mean being affected by the alcohol, right? But in any case, yeah, where I grew up, there's a pretty solid culture of this kind of drinking in high school kids, right? This friend of mine, she would drink a little bit, and then she would grab some guy by the shirt and drag him off to another room and screw his brains out. And she's talked about this after she joined two things. She did two things at university. She joined a Christian fellowship club, and she took women's studies, which at the time I thought, well, that's kind of self-contradictory. But the more I get to know modern tradcons, the more I realize that's not entirely. But so she went through a lot of regret because of, the whole chastity admonishment in Christianity, which isn't necessarily a bad idea because it's a lot harder to get an STI if you're not having sex. But she started to feel really bad because she had done that a lot. Her body count, if somebody had asked her body count, she probably would have turned beet red and refused to talk. Well, then her women's studies class convinced her that every time she had done that, that represented that guy that she dragged off, that stranger that she didn't even know, that she dragged off into another room by the shirt to have sex with, that represented him raping her.
Oh, God.
Even if he was just as drunk.
This clip that we just watched seems to be telling people, if you feel like telling a woman, let's go back to my place and fuck, don't. Instead, just say, let's play Scrabble with our bodies. Right. If you say to a woman, let's go back to my place and fuck, that will be a turn off to like 95% of women. They'll be like, good Lord, no. Bye.
This man has obviously never heard of Twister.
But the other 5% might go, all right, I respect your boldness to say what you're thinking of saying, and I happen to be incredibly horny. Let's go. But if you say, let's play Scrabble with our bodies, 100% of women will be like, good Lord, no. And even despite how horny I am, if you can't even fucking say what you're thinking of saying, if you're just going to hide behind this
euphemism,
this euphemistic simping bullshit, like, I can't even respect that. You're a horribly horny cunt, and you can't even say what you think. None of this is a turn on for me or anyone. Like, it's the worst of both worlds. Go the fuck away. And maybe that's the point. They're encouraging men to do the most unattractive turn-offy thing they could possibly do, and that's the whole point of it.
There's one kind of woman who will fall for a dorkable. And that's if she's a dork, she'll fall for a dorkable. But you can't like have zero confidence. You can't have zero identity of your own and be a dorkable and have a woman fall for it. Girls can get away with that, right? And guys will be like, oh, isn't that sweet? I'm gonna save this woman. Captain Save-A-Ho to the rescue. But when women do that, they do it to men who are like serial killers, not the adorkable guys. But I will confess that there are guys that I wasn't interested in that I went out with because they worked really hard you could tell, to work up the courage, and then fumbled all over themselves asking me out. It was like, I can't say no now. This poor guy just like put his head on the chopping block. So yeah, of course I went and had a great time and made friends, and one guy I actually went out with for quite a while after that. But it's got to be real. If you're faking, you can't fake adorkable, right?
Yeah.
You can make it creepy, trying to fake it, or you know, you can look like you were trying to be too clever by half, like this guy. Like I said, he's never heard of Twister. I mean, come on, if you're gonna suggest a game,
we're gonna make
that's a euphemism
words.
for sex, say, "Oh, let's go back to my place and play Twister naked." But no, Scrabble, words with friends, yeah. And the sad thing is, these are lines people are reading. Like, they've been given these. These are not. I don't think these are these people's
Somebody
own ideas.
somebody wrote this and got paid for it. That's just trash.
Yeah, and I don't know if these are actors that they pulled from like the Screen Actors Guild, or if these are actors that are part of the company that got pulled to do the acting in this. But yeah, this is.
I'll let myself out.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I just saw you, because I had this dream last night that like we hooked up.
So they're just
Yeah,
telling
and-
women to use pickup lines that don't work for men.
No, they will work for men, and that's the tragic thing, because so many
Well, it depends
men
on how drunk the chick is.
so many men are so down bad that they would go for that. And that's what we need to teach men. Like, this is the female equivalent of that impossibly adorkable bullshit. No,
Yeah.
like it's not like women ever do go for pickup lines like that, because they don't need to. But in the event that they do, like, fucking don't fall for it, gentlemen, because it's a trap, should I say?
Yeah.
Like, just because a woman seems interested in you doesn't mean she's not going to turn out to be a nightmare later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this continued for like there's a.
I really like when you did that one thing that last time. You know, when you did the thing.
No, I don't know.
Let me know
What?
you think, but I kind of want to do that thing to you.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
Like, so the gist that I'm getting from this, all right, is that asking for consent has to be awkward.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, the only way that we can have sex is if I definitely get your permission, but I'm gonna be as vague about asking the question as possible. What?
Yeah.
Just get right to the fucking point. If listen, and I'm not saying that consent is necessarily a bad thing, right? Because I would never want to push up on somebody and then he was like, "Ew," you know what I mean? Like that's just a bad feeling overall. But holy shit, there's a fine line between being direct and this. I don't even know if it's a fine line. But there's a difference between being direct and this wimpy, "Oh, would you mind? Oh, I would like to do that thing." Like, that's such a fucking turnoff. You know what I mean? And women love when men are direct. They don't want men that beat around the bush, so to speak.
I had one friend that used to like to steal movie lines. She'd walk up to a guy and be like, "Nice shoes, want to fuck?" I don't remember what movie she said it came from, but she liked it so much. She used to just use it on her boyfriend and be like, "You don't have to ask." But like the chick that I just talked about that grabbed guys by the shirt and dragged them off into another room, all right? What you learn in these consent classes is that those guys still have to ask for consent, right?
Mm-hmm.
She gave her consent. She grabbed him by the shirt, dragged him off into another room, and started ripping his clothes off. That is her communicating. She didn't ask for his consent.
Right.
Don't go with any woman who rips your shirt off, by the way. That shirt could be expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
How much I paid for these threads? This is my drip, baby. Fucking leave the fit alone, bitch.
The most important part of the shirt is, or the most expensive part of the shirt is the court case you have later on.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Y'all, I think we need to get over the taboo nature of talking about sex and consent and just ask for consent. Just ask, honey. The sexiest thing to do is
Okay, yeah, the people in the chat that have been going, he's gay, he's gay. Okay, I'm not gonna argue with you now. That's a distinct possibility. Not that I haven't met straight guys that sound totally gay, but and I have met gay guys that sound totally straight too. But yeah, the vibes are there.
There are so many metrosexuals now that
I know.
it's sort of difficult to tell if it's a repressed gay guy or a repressed straight guy. Like,
I'll be honest. I don't.
So much overlap now.
I wish that guys had as much leeway in terms of being soft-spoken or having a southern drawl or calling people honey and sweetie and stuff like that without being called gay or effeminate, as if it is a derogatory term. Like it's not really wrong or shouldn't be derogatory to call a man those things, and he still identifies as a man. Like there's nothing wrong with identifying as your birth sex and not meeting the stereotype for your birth sex. Women get away with it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I promise.
But that's the end of that one. We have the other one here is a little more straightforward DEI. So we switched to this one. This one we tested, and Allison saw like 30 seconds of it and just about blew her stack. This video, again, I want to remind you, all right, you've if you're a regular listener or viewer, you've seen the production value of our videos when we make a scripted video and use images and put statistics up on the screen and everything. We do not make $5,000 a video, or at least I personally don't, right? And Mike puts a lot more production value in his because his require talent that I don't have.
I'm lucky if I make $1.
Puppets.
I'm lucky if I make. If anyone gives me a super chat, I earn more than I from advertising dollars, which is why I don't put ads on my videos anymore. I'm like, fuck it.
Yeah. But this is what we get for a few thousand, somewhere between a few thousand and $25,000 that the military has paid a company to create videos. This one is called Gender Identity / Expression. And this is part of their sexual assault prevention training.
About
YouTube says we don't really need to watch this video.
expression and gender identity. So let's get into it.
God.
This already has at least more production value than the last one did. They actually had some video cards.
Speak on this topic because I identify as non-binary, and as an NB person, I feel like a lot of gender.
You're a woman. Shut up.
Non-conforming trans people. In the
This is one that gets me too because I think it's a try too hard kind of thing to create all of these different sexes and gender identities and so on, instead of just saying you can be how you were born. You can be, if you were born female, you can be female. You were born male, you can be male. And it doesn't mean that you have to like all of the same things as all the other people who were born the same sex as you, or think in the same ways all the time, like the same sex of partner, any of that, right? Dress the same, do your hair the same. None of that has to be set in stone. It's just the main thing is, if you're trying to reproduce, you want somebody that's the opposite sex to help you with that. But aside from that, there really shouldn't be a whole lot of politics around this. right? The main thing is that differentiates the genders right now is that we allow women to be less adult than men and still identify as adults.
Look, if she ever gets into a fight with a man who claims he's non-binary, she'll be like, "I'm a woman."
Yep.
And therefore she will win that fight. If she ever gets into a legal dispute with a man who claims he's non-binary, she'll be like, "I'm a woman," so that she can win that legal dispute.
Yep.
It's all fucking window dressing until it comes to the crunch.
Guaranteed.
Fucking stop bullshitting us, you cunt.
Yep, guaranteed. And when you really think about it, there isn't anything about what someone considers their gender identity that is relevant to any other aspect of life. There's not you don't treat people differently at dinner. Like, non-binary people don't eat potatoes, guys. So don't serve potatoes to the non-binary person. Not like that, right? Unless somebody's allergic to potatoes, and then I really feel sorry for them. But in any case, yeah, it's like not information that matters. And all of these made up identities are really not even window dressing. They're static, like television static. They obscure the real picture of the person.
Her hair is blue. Her hair is blue. Her opinion is invalid.
If I'm getting to know somebody, though, like, I would rather find out that they're just absolutely obsessed with growing roses, and they want to get the most blooms on the least, bushy plant or something. Or they're trying to cook the perfect souffle, or they could tell you every car that was made before 1990, make, model, and all of the highlights of what it did and what was special about it and everything. Like, I don't care what your gender identity is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't tell me anything about you. But here we go.
Queer community in general are often left out of conversation. We still have to talk about all of these people who are not feeling seen, and that's what I'm here to do. Cisgender means you identify with a gender.
It means that somebody had to make up a term for normal that wasn't normal, but because they decided that if they admit that normal is normal, then they have to admit that everything that isn't normal is abnormal. And since we still have this idea that abnormal equates to bad, instead of addressing that, trying to change it, say, okay, yeah, some bad things are abnormal and some abnormal things are bad, but that doesn't mean that abnormal is always bad.
Do you know, I'm going to invent a term. I'm going to call it render. It's not the same as race, right? I was born racially white, so my biological race is white, but my render is black. So therefore I count as black. And if anyone says, "But you're not black," well, I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about render. And therefore I'm black. That's exactly the same bullshit as pretending that gender is the same as sex, and then saying gender's not the same as sex, but it is the same as sex, and just fucking swinging from one thing to the other. It's fucking wordplay. It's childish bullshit wordplay, but inventing a word that means sex, but doesn't mean sex, but does mean sex, depending on what fucking conversation you're having at the time. Just fuck off. And I get to say that because my render is black. So I even get to call you a... just this one time, I'm not going to say it.
I got a comment in the chat, abnormal health equals disease. And I responded, being immune to HIV is an abnormal health condition. It's a real one, by the way. There are a tiny percentage of people in the world. Never assume that you're one, because if you're wrong, it really sucks to find out the hard way. But there's a tiny percentage of people in the world that are immune to the HIV virus, and so they can never get infected with it. They can have it in their system. They can have it, like you can not infect them with it, but expose them to it. But they don't get the infection. They don't get AIDS. I don't think they're able to pass it on either. I think they kill it. But in any case, there's things like that. Being a genius is an abnormal health condition. It's an abnormal mental condition. There are a tiny minority of people in the world who have an abnormal health condition that makes them unusually physically strong. Where like things that would normally hurt you to try to do, they can do them. Like lifting and pushing and so on, that the amount of weight would be impossible for someone their size. They're capable. I happen to know somebody. It's not me. But in any case, those are all abnormal medical conditions. Obviously, every disability is an abnormal medical condition. And yeah, disease is also, but abnormal can be neutral. It can be bad. It can be good or beneficial. It can be a combination of things. And yeah, being above average height, being well above average height, especially for your sex and your local area, like there's different average heights in different countries and such. That would be an abnormal medical condition. And sometimes it causes medical conditions that are bad, but or at least that make your life harder. But it's not necessarily always. Like there are people who are perfectly healthy, but they're unusually tall, and they benefit from it in different ways. And then there are people who are unusually short and are perfectly healthy. So, yeah, it's having an abnormal situation or an abnormal condition or behavior or anything, like just because something is not the norm doesn't mean it's bad. And it's fair to fight for that, but it's not fair to fight for the idea that something has to be given a different name besides normal to communicate that everything that's not that isn't bad. And that's what cisgender is. It's insisting on giving something that is normal a name other than normal in order to protect the feelings of everything else that is not cisgender. And like, I don't care about everything else that is not cisgender. I don't have an objection to it. I don't have an aversion to it, and I don't have any allegiance to it. But I don't like the term cisgender because I think it's unnecessary. You just call people normal.
And why is there no such thing as cisracial or transracial?
There we go.
It's because this was spurred into motion by this fucking gender cult or sexual cult or whatever. It's called feminism.
Well, in all honesty, sex is actually a much more valid division among people than race. There's the differences between races are much, much smaller than people realize. Versus, like, the difference between the sexes, there's a whole lot of biological differences between the sexes. There's even differences between the sexes on average. Like the norm is for there to be significant differences in the way someone thinks, depending on what sex they are. Like there's always people who are atypical, but again, atypical, like abnormal, not necessarily bad, right? But and when it comes to race, yeah, there's aesthetic differences, and sometimes on average there may be some physical differences, but there's a lot of stuff that we really can't prove because a lot of those differences occur under circumstances that can affect the outcome. Like, one group of people is bigger and stronger, but they also have a better diet in the country where they are bigger and stronger. Or one group of people has a higher IQ, but their entire culture is focused on academic success. And other cultures are less focused on academic success. So, like, is it genetic or is it cultural? And we don't always know. But when it comes down to like biology, the biological end of it, there's not that big of a difference. And so race is almost it's almost as useless as differentiating between gender identities, in my opinion. Like there's only a few things you can do with it. Like in medicine, there are maybe some groups that have a greater likelihood of particular genetic outcomes, but because those can be racial. And like John Doe mentioned Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I have. That actually has some racial connections, and like that's one of the reasons they do a DNA test for it. Um, so yeah, like it's one of those another one of those things I think people just get too hung up on.
It's because our culture has been taken over and dominated and screwed up and turned upside down by a, I don't want to even say gender cult. I want to say sexual cult. It's called feminism. I mean, we might as well just go ahead and call it feminism. Our entire identity, our entire sort of self-worth has been screwed up and turned upside down by this sexual cult we call feminism, and it's become an identitarian mess, which has also affected race relations as a secondary fuck up. Like, which is why I'm so sick of people arguing about race and about nationality and shit when all of this came from this sex cult. And it's hard to call it that because sex is an ambiguous word that can mean having sex or having different sexes, and that's what allowed the word gender to worm its way in as this way of saying the difference between men and women without meaning sexual intercourse.
Yeah.
But it's always been the difference between men and women has been fucked up beyond all recognition since 100 years ago, since the advent of feminism. It's more like 200 years ago, but it really took effect 100 years ago, where people just started completely foobarring, fucking up beyond all recognition, the difference between men and women. And once that took hold, the feminists went, well, now that we've completely foobarred the difference between men and women, we can foobar the difference between everything else, but not race. We're still not allowed to do that. We can say men are women and we can say women are men. You still can't say blacks are whites and whites are blacks, or yellows are browns and browns are yellows. But we're still going to operate along these lines of these are the oppressed people and these are not the oppressed people. But they can't change themselves because we still need them as this secondary mode of operating these the oppression Olympics. But it's no surprise that men can change to women and women can change to men, because that's the initial vector of what we want to erase from history. Feminists can use race as a way to control people, but they've already gone so deep into using the difference between men and women as a way to control people that they can completely erase it altogether and say if a man wants to be a woman, he can be a woman. If he wants to be a man, he can be a man. They've already gone so far to completely erase that difference that doesn't even matter anymore. But race still does. And if we let them keep going for another 100 years or so, maybe they will get to the point where yeah, you really can have transracialism, where whites can claim to be blacks and blacks can claim to be whites, and it will be whites claiming to be blacks, like across the board. I mean, it already is to some extent. We've had a few prime
I was going to say, we've
examples.
had a long history of a cultural attempt to do that without actually trying to claim it as a trans thing. But because of the idea that, so the part of where this comes from is the postmodernist idea that perception is reality. Right? Perception is your interpretation of reality through your sensory input and your way of thinking about things. That's perception. Reality is gravity works. Right? You step off of the edge of a building, you will fall. If you don't have something to keep you from falling, you will fall. Right? Perception is I don't always notice when I'm boring someone. Reality is they're still bored. Right? It doesn't matter.
You're just assuming up is up and down is down, Hannah. Maybe up is down. Maybe up identifies as down. Hey.
Yep. And bacon identifies as popcorn. Just ask Reddit. Yeah, actually, Havoc in the chat says, "Hello, can everyone see me? Yes, we can see you. You are not. you are real. You are not invisible. If perception was reality, the invisible man would disappear forever. As soon as nobody could see him, he'd just be gone. That'd be it. No ability to affect anything. But the idea that perception is reality gets then translated into this idea that you can say something is true and it becomes your truth. It's real for you, therefore it's real, even if it's not what other people see. And over the years, that got turned into, we can take the tiny percentage of people in the world who have the specific form of body dysmorphic disorder that makes them suffer gender dysphoria and capitalize on their dysphoria by selling them a whole bunch of medical treatments that won't make them feel any better most of the time. But we can convince them that it's supposed to make them feel better, and they'll be too upset and embarrassed to do anything about it when they get to the end of the surgery and realize they have to have medical maintenance for the rest of their lives, and there's nothing they can do about it, and they still don't feel better.
Like, it's bizarre as saying the sky is green. Like, but there hasn't been an academic push to claim the sky is green for the last 100 years. So it still seems bizarre to say the sky is green. But there has been an academic push for the last 100 years to claim that men are women. And it is mostly men are women. Like, it's been a secondary symptom to also be able to claim that women are men. But it's for the most part, it's been men are women. It's been men must be women, and therefore they should be women, and therefore they are women. Yep. But it's just as bizarre as saying the sky is green, or that dogs are cats, or that anything else. But people think it's normal to say that men are women and women are men because we've been so thrust upon by this, frankly, cult that says that men oppress women everywhere and always have, and therefore we should do away with the whole fucking idea of biological sex, which we call gender. Again, they call it a different word so that they can excuse themselves from abolishing the idea of biological sex. And it seems normal to normies, to most normies of all across the generations. It seems normal that that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. Like, it's absurd. It's no less absurd than claiming the sky is green. But it seems normal because it's been going on for so long.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing is, because there's a lot of money to be made with a lifetime of medical procedures, things that might have been more effective for the overwhelming majority of people with gender dysphoria haven't been pursued. Right? As at least not as enthusiastically by the medical profession. So yeah, in terms of who people are and what people are and all that, my philosophy on it is this: whatever status people have, whatever condition they're in, as long as they're not stepping on your toes, you just treat them like you treat everybody else. They're just people, and whatever is going on at the moment is going on at the moment. And unless there's some form of aggression taking place, they don't get treated any differently than anybody else. In my opinion, at least that's the way it should be. But if I were giving somebody medical advice, like as a friend, because obviously I'm not going to be doing it as a medical professional, I don't have that kind of qualification. But if I was suggesting to a friend, the pathway that they might take because they've realized that they're suffering from gender dysphoria, I would look for a much broader exploration than who's going to do my surgery, right? What other things can be done that might not involve surgery? That I'd do the same thing with somebody like, with Ehlers-Danlos, you end up with joint injuries because of it's a connective tissue disorder that causes joint hypermobility. It affects your various connective tissues, including your collagen. And one of the injuries that I have is I got a herniated disc when I was like 24 years old. And it's been damaged since then. Like it'll be next year, not this year, but next year I will have been walking with a damaged disc in my lower back for 30 years. And there are some people that, there's surgeries you can have to fix that. Yeah, doctor has to go in there with a scalpel and actually cut right close to my spine and the nerves that control my ability to walk, and open that up to possible infection, to possible slip ups. It's never going to be the same again. That tissue will always be weak again. It's got to be really bad before I decide that surgery is my only option. And if I can continue to wait, there have been advancements that have taken place during the last almost 30 years that my particular issue, there may come a day when it can be solved without surgery. And so if I don't have to do that, I'm not going to do it. And it's the same advice I would give anybody else. Like that's a last resort. Getting cut open is a last resort. And it's the same thing with dealing with pain. Like, I avoid pain medicine if I can. Obviously, if you got to go through something like a surgery, most people need some sort of pain relief after that because it really hurts to get cut open. Also really hurts to have your bones broken, whether it's professionally or by accident. And so, I understand a lot of people take pain medicine. But with the kind of pain that comes with Ehlers-Danlos, I prefer to try physical therapies instead, as much as humanly possible, because the drugs only work so well and they only work so long, and they can also mask damage that you should be aware of, right? So there's a lot of reasons besides prejudice that you want to, like, there's no prejudice involved in saying, maybe it's not a good idea to have a herniated disc surgery if you don't have to. And there's no prejudice involved in saying maybe you ought to take your time and explore other options before you have body parts altered permanently in ways that you can't go back on, and take hormones that can make you have a heart attack later in your life. Right? It's more about supporting somebody through a journey that involves a lot of information and a lot of potential choices, and not limiting those potential choices by making it political. And unfortunately, that's been done of late. It's been made very political, and people are not being offered choices that they should be offered because of that. And there are now people who are detransitioning, and they deeply regret having gone through the medical procedures. And it's not because, they, it's not because they were wrong themselves necessarily and just rushed forward into something against medical advice. It's because they didn't get good medical advice. That should never be the norm. That's a situation where abnormal is bad, right? That it's abnormal for a profession, like culture-wide, to do the wrong thing in one instance all the time. That being, give less of a spectrum of medical advice than is available regarding one's choices and what could possibly help with one's condition. That's really bad. And the fact that it's happening now, it happened in the 80s too, and it was an insurance company thing. My mom also had, it's Ehlers' genetic, and because she was short, nobody recognized it in her. So she had a really bad car accident in 1982, and she almost died from the impact. She had bone spurs grow after that. She had her discs just kind of slowly deteriorated. She had degenerative disc disease, which is essentially your back ages on fast forward. And there were a lot of things they could have done for her pain that didn't involve drugs, right? But what the insurance companies basically did was they wouldn't approve things like massage therapy or physical therapy with different exercises assigned and things, TENS units and so on. But they would prescribe drugs that do damage to your liver and your kidneys and your heart and your lungs, and unfortunately also your circulatory system. Well, there's one particular type of EDS that causes damage in specifically to your circulatory system. That's the one we have, and it causes aneurysms and strokes. You start noticing you have it when you start noticing varicose veins a lot younger than other people get them, and so they did a lot of damage to her. And then in the early 2000s, when the country changed its mind about what pain care should look like, then they yanked all of her medications, even the ones that are not considered addictive. And all of a sudden, she was left without any pain care. And when COVID hit, she was already miserable, and she was already trying to schedule a surgery because there was a great deal of damage to her back. She actually was walking bent over sideways, and because of how bad her back was. And the last time she went into the hospital for that, and they did that surgery, she got COVID and she died. Like that's what happens when you limit the spectrum of medical advice that somebody can have, and then you flip-flop on them. And then all of a sudden they're too old to do what should have been done for them 30 years earlier. And they can't benefit from that anymore because there's been too much damage. but you won't let them continue to do what you made them do for 30 years. So this situation, when I look at what's happening with the politicization of the trans community and how it's gotten to the point where people are essentially being tricked into only going down that one pathway. And it's a pathway that requires lifelong medical care. And going back from it isn't just a straightforward, we'll stop doing this and then we won't need it anymore. Right? There's medical procedures to go back to. And you can never go back all the way. You can never get back what was removed or turned inside out or sewn shut. It's never the same afterwards. When you have a surgery, your body's never the same afterwards. It's one of the things that really enrages me about gender politics, because these are every single person that goes through these medical procedures and sits with a doctor and takes advice, and they're all human beings who are being treated a particular way. They're essentially being treated like cattle. Well, really more like guinea pigs. And I am really afraid of what's going to happen in the next 10 years with especially the kids. I'm dreading seeing the changes in level of psychological damage that people are seeking help for, because I do believe that there's going to be a lot of pain coming, both for the people who have been lied to and their whole family. And so yeah, this stuff, I hate this. And I mean, I know it set it off with the term cisgender, but it is a symptom of a much larger problem, right? Perception is not reality. Perception is what you see. Perception is what you notice. Perception is what you are able to recognize. But it doesn't mean that it's the whole picture. And when we make that mistake, we put people at risk.
Gender that you were assigned at birth. Transgender means you do not identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. Non-binary means you don't identify with being a man or a woman, right? Me personally.
So there we go. The non-binary thing. I swear to you, I firmly believe that some gender studies professor or gender studies student came up with that because they didn't want to be trans, but they wanted to be special. I don't believe that its origin was in somebody not identifying as anything.
As a non-binary person, I sometimes find myself smack dab in the middle. Sometimes I find myself leaning more feminine. Sometimes I find myself leaning more masculine. Sometimes.
See, when I was growing up, we used to just call that a tomboy.
We didn't really have a word for when men deviated from what men were expected to do. There's never been an equivalent of a tomboy. I mean, make of that what you will. I guess it's just because there are certain things expected of women, and there are certain things expected of men, and if women wish to deviate from that, it's fine, and it's always been fine. We called them tomboys, and if men wish to deviate from that, they're not allowed to.
Yeah.
They just have to. They just have to do hard labor and get punched in the face. You know what I mean?
And a lot of what's required, what's expected, socially required of men, connects to being prepared to take responsibility for everything. In all honesty, stoicism You got to be stoic if you're going to take responsibility for everything. And you think of emergency situations like a flood or forest fire and stuff like that. Um, a lot of the qualities that define femininity don't work well with going out and uh, layering yourself in clothing designed to keep the heat off of your skin and holding a hose and to keep fire from advancing into a neighborhood, or digging a ditch to keep fire from advancing into a neighborhood. You didn't have anything where you could go in there with ribbons and bows and a skirt and do that. You're gonna end up catching on fire. Similarly, if you're the person with a tow rope in your hand pulling a lifeboat away from somebody's house, well it's full of women and children and pets, you're probably not doing that in a dress either with ribbons and bows. You're probably in, you know, you're probably soaked to the bone, but you're probably in hip waders or other gear to keep you as dry as possible. You probably have training. If you're moving trees after a flood, if you're uh, tearing up the houses that crashed into each other in the flood and are now rubble, so that you can get stuff out of the way and rebuild. None of that is done in a manner that is identified with femininity, because if you start discussing things that are identified like stereotypically feminine, a lot of them are um, self-indulgent things. Not everything, right? But a significant amount of what identifies or separates femininity from masculinity is that the feminine end is self-indulgent. I can't go walking through this wet grassy field because I have my shoes have these spikes on the heel, straight down into the ground, break an ankle, as opposed to, oh yeah, my boots will handle that just fine. Like self-indulgent, dressed in a way that you can't do heavy labor today, self-indulgent. Decorate yourself in a way that maybe communicates a little extra wealth, and you're not worried that you're going to get mugged on the street for that. Very self-indulgent. Not something most men would do, especially in any neighborhood where that communication might result in alerting a local gang to the possibility that this guy might be a lucrative mark because he's actually likely to get mugged. So yeah, now when you think about it, at about the age of 14 or 15 years old, most guys are expected to start working so they can earn money to have a ride and be ready to date and, start preparing for what are they going to do when they grow up? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to go to trade school? Are they going to get a job? Are they going to join the military? Are they going to get drafted? Whereas gals that age don't have that. You can get a job, but nobody's going to be like, wow, what a loser. She hasn't even had a job yet. She doesn't even have a car yet. Like, nobody's going to say that about them because they don't have to have that. You don't have to have money to go out on dates. If you want money, it's because you're going to get your hair done and your nails done and buy especially pretty clothes and stuff to attract a date. Unless you're a gal that dates other gals and then somebody has to pay, right? But yeah, being female, the defining characteristics that separate femininity from masculinity, a shitload of them are about self-indulgence or self-aggrandizement, like makeup and hair extensions and I don't know, I don't get into all that stuff because I'm allergic to it. Literally, a lot of it. Um, so I lucked out. I don't spend $150 to $300 a month making myself look like somebody else, because I can't, and therefore I don't have to. But a lot of women do that, and I get treated like I'm less feminine because I don't. So that's one of the reasons that I was able to notice that, was that there's a lot of self-indulgent things that, sure, it would be really, really nice, if it didn't turn my skin red and put little bumps all over me. But I'm not going to do that because I don't like that when that happens. It's not self-indulgent for me. So there you go.
It's like the difference between the Den Mother and the Solar Father, which is coming to fruition since that a statue was put up in Times Square of the 12-foot plus-size black woman. Sargon did a brilliant piece on this on the Lotus Eaters recently.
The statue, was this statue of an individual who had some great achievement?
No. It was just it wasn't even an actual person. It was a random individual rendered to look like a plus-size black woman, just to appease, presumably,
Plus-size black woman.
random plus-size black women, just for the sake of being random plus-size black women, not for having done anything, like all the statues of white men are statues of white men who have done things to advance society.
Yeah, think of at least one plus-size black woman who made a shit ton of money being famous for being a plus-size black woman, and she didn't have a statue.
A statue of Harriet Tubman would have been fine, but they didn't bother with that. They just went random plus-size black woman. Just for the sake of being
that. Even if they were going to do that, they could have at least picked somebody who accomplished something. Even just accomplishing the condition of being the first person to become wealthy by being famous for being a plus-size black woman. Right? Just even that would have been better than just, oh, this is just a random rendition of a plus-size black woman. Like, what the? Yeah, they could have. Oprah Winfrey was a plus-size black woman. She wasn't famous for being plus-size. She was famous for wrecking people's marriages by telling women on on her show all the things that must be wrong in their home. But
well, she also happened to be plus size, and
yeah,
a spectacle was made.
Struggle.
Yeah, but a spectacle was made of it. It was absolutely a topic, and when she lost a bunch of weight, that was a topic of her show, and it was for weeks, if not months.
Yeah, she's had a lifelong struggle. It would have been, I'm sure there still probably would have been criticism, but at least the statue would have had a purpose.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah.
If I was black, I would be insulted. I'm insulted. I am plus size. I'm insulted by that part. Like, they just random plus size woman. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's sad. That's just sad.
It's beyond sad. It's kind of demonic. Well, it's worse than demonic. It represents the god of the infinite blackness. The that which exists for its own sake. Like, check out Sargon's story that he did on the Lotus Eaters. It was today, because he goes he goes right back into the ancient god significance of this. Like, for a long, we're talking 20 years ago, there was this dispute between the solar male god and the Den female god. Ishtar, I think, is the archetypal sort of female god that just exists because it exists. It doesn't require any achievements.
Yeah.
It's just there because it is there, and it demands sacrifices from everyone around it. And the Venus statues that were carved for the longest of times, like even before prehistory, of just these depictions of fat women, sometimes on thrones, who don't do anything for society. They just demand sacrifices from everyone else. And yes, this was a thing for the longest of times before the invention, and yes, it is an invention of a male god who actually does things to advance society. And yeah, I kind of feel bad for all the bad things I've said about Christianity and all these religions that actually revere a male god that actually does things to improve society. And there are these huge differences that go back long before any Abrahamic religion. This is the most ancient of things you can imagine. It sort of goes back to the yin yang thing, that men represent the light and women represent the darkness, and that's not as misogynistic as it sounds. It's always sort of supposed to be a sort of balance that one there's the pushing forward and the pulling back that is represented in the duality of the male and the female, and it's not like one is perfectly true good and the other is perfectly bad. But once you begin to worship the devouring den mother, as so many would call it, you find yourself reversing back into the infinite black nothingness. But it's important to equally revere the infinite white somethingness of the solar male. Like I say, it's represented in the yin yang thing, as it is represented in having at least two gods. The male that represents the light and represents the darkness. Again,
well, I think here's a good way to think of it is if you think light is always good, try waiting out the pain and itchiness from a 2nd-degree sunburn. If you think darkness is always bad, try sleeping with a 300-watt bulb shining in your face. Like there's always there's a time for everything, and a use for everything, and a need for everything. So there you go. And we used to be able to work together. We used to be able to balance each other out and support each other, and each sort of slip in where the other's weaknesses were and shore things up so that nobody, we had each other's backs. Nobody fell because femininity or masculinity. But yeah, there's a interesting. We have in the vertical chat. I think that's pronounced same element or same element, like same element, like the two words. All sunshine makes a desert, so the Arabs say. Yep, all sunshine makes a desert. So, and all rain makes Seattle, and we don't want to go there. It's very bad. Bad place. Just a silly place. But I don't know if I want to go through the whole gender. We're not going to try to do it all tonight. We might start next week by looking at a little more of this gender expression thing. But she's basically going to spend this whole video explaining about gender, different gender identities, and how people can express them and how people can be tolerant of various gender identities, when all it really needs to be said is, if somebody isn't directly stepping on your toes, don't treat them like they are. It doesn't matter who they are, how they look, what's different about them, or what. If someone's not directly stepping on your toes, don't treat them like they are. And they should give you the same courtesy. But instead, it's probably going to be about how you have to, whether you agree or not, whether you believe in it or not, use other people's chosen pronouns, which is compelled speech, which is a violation of the United States Constitution that has been imposed on our service members. The guys that fight to protect the rest of us from having our constitutional rights trampled by some other country coming and taking us over. Their constitutional right to, like, they don't get to consent or refuse to consent. They're obligated. Which I think is pretty pathetic to do to them. So, but I'm not going to go through the rest of this today because it's already 9 o'clock and we still have our patron show to do. So I think I'm going to cut it short here, and we will continue next week. We will look maybe a little bit more at this video, but there's another company that I'm going to want to look at next week. This company is called We End Violence, and they're another company that the Department of Defense paid to create presentations. So we're going to look a little bit at their website and their services, and it's pretty similar, which means that they're paying multiple companies to do the same thing. So
gotta love that government efficiency.
Yeah, it's what you got to look forward to next week. And I think we should be mostly through this next week because there are other things that we're probably going to end up discussing. But for those who are all panicked that, DEI is getting canceled in the military, the military has come out and said they're still going to do sexual assault prevention training, and they're going to have sexual assault response training, and they're going to have a system for handling it when somebody does engage in stupid behavior or wrongdoing, and it's just not going to be filled with all this gender identity stuff because it doesn't really have a place in the military. So there you go. So with that, hopefully Bryant's still listening because he's running the stopping point. But I don't have any super chats that I can see or any Rumble rants. We read the one super chow that we have. So I will say thanks everybody for listening to the weirdness. Thanks to my two co-hosts for going through this with me. Thanks, Brian, for helping out with this. It makes things easier for me. And everybody else who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.